Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Mel Tonasket says he is amazed at how far his tribe has come in the last half century. He is a longtime leader from the Colville tribes, and he has been on the front lines of saving and strengthening his tribe's sovereignty during that time. After near termination, the Confederated Tribes of Colville are thriving. Tonasket talks about what it takes to build and keep his tribal culture. He is our November Native in the Spotlight. That's next after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. The Navajo Nation Council is considering a motion to remove the tribe's president, Boo Nygren, and Vice President Rochelle Montoya after a special prosecutor accused Nygren of misusing government funds. As KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrozio reports, the council could have taken action as early as Thursday until a judge in Window Rock, Arizona, stepped in.
Council Speaker Crystalline Curley sponsored the bill to oust the pair. Nygren has accused Curley of seeking his removal so she can take his place.
All I can say, this is not a political move on my part. This is a necessary step to protect our nation's financial stability.
2/3 of the 24-member council must approve, and it's unclear whether Curley has the votes. On Friday, she released 465 pages detailing allegations and hoped for a swift vote while acknowledging that delegates needed time to examine the evidence.
Given the complexity of the issue, the number of alleged violations and the volume of documents involved, pretty sure that a vote before Thanksgiving is very unlikely. A more realistic timeline would be after the holiday.
That timeline changed Tuesday when a judge granted a motion from Nygren's attorneys to block the bill pending a hearing next month. As for Vice President Montoya, who was elected independently from Nygren, she denies involvement with any of his alleged violations and says he stripped her duties, resources, and budget. One invoice documented a $3,000 loan for travel expenses Nygren said he needed because of an argument with his wife, Apache County Attorney Jasmine Blackwater Nygren. He also spent $3,000 renovating his Apache County home and borrowed nearly $1,200 renting tables and chairs for his daughter's birthday party. Another $6,000 went directly to his then Chief of Staff, Patrick Sandoval, to cover car repairs. Sandoval also got a loan to gift Nygren a $1,500 birthday present. It's unclear, according to the receipts, whether anything has been paid back. When asked, Nygren's staff reiterated he would not comment on any specifics. For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrozio.
This year, 5 Native Americans were among 29 people named Bush Fellows. The Bush Fellowship provides up to $150,000 over 2 years for fellows to build on their leadership skills. In the third of 5 profiles, Brian Bull of Buffalo's Fire highlights an Oglala Lakota advocate for the arts and boosting financial support for creative natives.
Lori Puyer has been active in the arts for decades, but beyond making art, she also wanted to find ways to make it sustainable within tribal communities. When Puyer became active with the First Peoples Fund in 1999, she coordinated research into the arts in Native communities, particularly the Pine Ridge Reservation.
And through that research, we found that 71% of the households were engaged in some sort of tradition-based, home-based business, but 52% of that household was tradition forms of art. So that's how the Rolling Res Arts bus was born, because we were seeing the needs for artists, and then being in a community the size of Pine Ridge. It was hard for artists to get to our training workshops, and we'd partner with Lakota Funds, which is a loan fund. And it was really our artist idea.
The Rolling Res Arts Bus has traveled 8,000 miles across the Pine Ridge and Cheyenne River reservations and even visited the Sacred Stone Camp at Standing Rock. It also doubles as a mobile bank and teaches Native artists about running a business and accessing credit and capital. Puyer says she'll use her Bush Fellowship to explore socially responsible ways to invest in Native artists that align with cultural values. For National Native News, I'm Brian Bull.
And I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support by the American Indian College Fund, providing millions of dollars of scholarships to Native students every year. Applications are accepted through May 31st at collegefund.org or by phone at 800-766-FUND. The Indian Arts and Crafts Board promotes Indian artists of federally recognized tribes through its online source directory. Information on this no-charge opportunity available at doi.gov/IACB, who support this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Tribal leader Mel Tonasket credits the existence of his tribe to a contentious vote more than 50 years ago. Tonasket was a young, newly elected council member, and the tribe was split over the idea of termination. He cast the decisive vote to preserve what we know as the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. Tonasket would go on to a number of leadership positions, including president of the National Congress of American Indians. There he advocated for landmark policy changes, including the Indian Child Welfare Act and the Indian Health Care Improvement Act. He was just recognized by NCAI for a lifetime of leadership. Today on our show, Mel Tonasket joins us as this month's Native in the Spotlight. If you have a question or a comment you'd like to contribute to this conversation, please join us by calling 1-800-996-2848. Joining us now from Omak, Washington is Mel Tonasket. He is a member of the Colville Tribal Business Council, a former Colville Tribes chairman, and a former president of the National Congress of American Indians. He is a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. Mel, good morning. It's great to have you on the show. Welcome to Native America Calling.
Good morning. Good to be able to talk to you.
I'm excited here, Mel. Such a long, distinguished career. You've served in multiple leadership positions, beginning with being elected to the Colville Tribal Council more than 50 years ago. What motivates your participation in tribal government for so long?
Well, what brought me into it was termination. And when I came out of the Navy in 1962, I worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I worked for the same BIA team that terminated the Klamath tribe, and they were sent up here to get the Colville tribe ready to be terminated. And I got to see how they were doing it. And I lasted about eight years before I quit, and I started questioning what was going on around our country here around the Colville. Examples, I'd go to the school board. How come 90% of the kids from freshman to senior year were dropping out or failing? How come 90% of the people in your county jail are my people when we make up 10% of the population? I didn't try to give answers. I just challenged how come. And a lady by the name of Lucy Covington, who was on the tribal council, heard what I was doing and came to me and asked me if I'd run for council opposing termination. And that's what got me into tribal politics. And then she took me under her wing to teach me how to be a Colville tribal councilman.
Mel, tell me more about Lucy Covington. What was her background, and what was it about her that just really inspired you to assume more of a leadership role?
Well, she was on the tribal council here. She comes from a line of a couple chiefs, and so she has some real traditional thinking, and is a good spokesman for the tribe and for tribal sovereignty. And I don't know really what she saw in me, because I didn't have any idea to run for council, but I seen her during my time working for the BIA, I heard that she was the minority. She was on the minority side of the tribal council. She was opposing termination. And when the council would go back to Washington, D.C. to lobby for termination, they wouldn't take her, of course. And so she had a few cows, so she'd sell a cow to pay her own way back there and lobby against termination. And I knew that about her. And so I knew that if I went with her, that I would be going to somebody that is really committed to the tribe. Mm-hmm. And they let me when we got on the tribal council, and it was 7-7, 7 terminators, 7 non-terminators, and we were the non-terminators, and we were doing our reorganization, picking our chair, vice chair, and so on. She said we're going to give the chair to the terminator side, which I was opposed, but she explained that chairman only votes in case of a tie, and so as long as there's 7 of us there, we'll always win the vote. Well, that made sense, so we gave it to the other side. And then the very first motion that council made was they meaning the non-terminator side, allowed me to make a motion to remove that BIA superintendent immediately. And that vote came out 6-9.
Okay.
I mean, 6-7. So that was my first win in a tribal government vote.
Okay. And speaking of this BIA superintendent that was ousted, you had some issues with that individual in the past, correct?
Yes. When I was working for the BIA, I worked in what was called Indian money, IIM, Individual Indian Monies, which did the check writing for tribal members who was getting money for leasing their land or timber sales or whatever, range leases that would come in. The BIA was kind of like its own little bank, and I worked in that little bank. And so I got to see what the BIA was doing. I got to see that superintendent take people's land out of trust, meaning in the Indian world, you know what trust land is, but non-Indian world probably don't know, but it's a tax exempt. It's held in trust by the United States government. And if I seen elders who couldn't even talk English, had to use interpreters when they came to my office, would have their lands taken out of trust by the superintendent, so because they wanted to clear their land to plant food for their animals. And that wasn't because the individual Indian asked for their land to be taken out of trust. It was just taken out of trust.
Completely outside of their consent. The land was taken out. Oh, wow. So that's just really shady. Mel, it sounds like what you saw were some of these really, really bad issues that ultimately led to the Cobell settlement.
Yes. I seen the superintendent take land out of an individual's account to buy a house in Cooley Dam, which is about 15 miles from where they live in the Spelem. And that wasn't because that individual requested that house to be purchased. It was just purchased. And so when I was seeing that, I started telling through interpreters, tell them you don't have to put your X on that piece of paper, because the superintendent was acting like they were, he was acting in their best interest as their trustee, that they were incompetent, basically. And I told them, he's got to prove you're incompetent. Tell him he's got to prove you're incompetent in a court of law. And he heard what I was doing, and he called me in his office. And he said, Tonasket, I hear you're advising people, and I want you to, do you know who pays your check? Yes, sir, I do, I said. Do you know who you work for then? Yes, sir, I do. And he said, okay, I don't expect to hear any more of these reports. Do you know what I'm saying? And I said, yes, sir, I do. And I walked across the hall, and I immediately told my department head, I quit. You can shove this job. And he said, no, you can't. You got to give us 2 weeks. And I said, in tougher words, I said, no, I don't. I'm leaving today. And I walked out in 1968, and I moved to OMAC, where the leaders of the termination movement is, and that's when I started challenging what was going on.
Okay. So, wow. So you ended up, you were the deciding vote, and that superintendent was let go. And this was just a really interesting crossroads there, not only for your tribe, but many tribes during the early 1970s. And you were ultimately this deciding vote to reject the government's payoff in exchange for terminating the tribes. What was that decision like? Tell me more about that. And what were the two sides arguing? Like, it was split. I mean, there were half of the council was supportive of termination. The other half was not. What was the arguments for and against?
The arguments for, in my thinking, is because we was going to get paid money to terminate. Each individual tribal member was supposedly going to get about $43,000 each, no matter what age. $43,000 back in 69 and 70 was a lot of money. Those of us that were opposed to termination, it wasn't the money what was important. It was keeping our land, our resources, and to keep our self-governance. But that was the big difference. The terminators wanted to get out from underneath the Bureau of Indian Affairs and get paid. But when we talked to people from the Menominee tribe and people from the other tribes that had been terminated and seen what happened to them and the money that they got, we used those people to our meetings to share their experiences of terminations, and I think that's what won us our seat enough to put up the fight.
We are talking with Mel Tonasket today. He is this month's Native in the Spotlight, a long, distinguished career in tribal service. Lots to talk about today with Mel Tonasket, and the phone lines are open for listeners who would like to join us. Maybe you remember this era during the early 1970s, late 60s, the termination era. You remember what that was like. Maybe your tribe was greatly impacted, or maybe you're familiar with Mel Tonasket and his career. Give us a call, 1-800-99-NATIVE. The Australian state of Victoria just signed that country's first treaty with Aboriginal peoples. Supporters say it provides a foundation to adequately recognize the history, culture, and value of Aboriginal people and their local knowledge. We're taking another look at how this historic milestone came about and what it means going forward. That's on the next Native America Calling.
The Indian Arts and Crafts Act protects authentic American Indian and Alaska Native artists and craftspeople and their art and craftwork. Under the Act, it is illegal to market art or craftwork misrepresented as American Indian, Indian, Native American, or Alaskan Native made, or as the product of a particular Indian tribe. Reporting potential Act violations can be done at doi.gov/IACB or at 1-888-ART-FAKE. Support provided by Indian Arts and Crafts Board.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. We are speaking with Mel Tonasket, a longtime leader from the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, about his own personal leadership and what's next for his tribe. We also want to hear from you today. How did leaders from your community navigate through the eras like termination and the beginning of self-determination? You can join us, 1-800-99-NATIVE. And we have a caller on the line right now. This is George, who is listening in Pine Ridge, South Dakota on Keeley Radio. Hello, George. Thanks for calling in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, George, you sound great.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, Mel, this is George Wilson. I worked with you guys back in the 60s and 70s, and I don't know if you remember me. It's been a long time. But I just wanted to thank you personally for all the work you've done for the tribes, and that your leadership, really had a huge impact on every tribe in the United States with the policies, the regulatory work work that was done, working with the Congress and the committees and putting programs together, 638, all that stuff. And I had a little work with Lucy Covington and some of the other people from Colville back when I was working at Muckleshoot. And I worked for maybe 4 or 5 tribes in the Northwest. And my tribe is the Pine Ridge, Oglala Sioux and Pine Ridge. But I mostly wanted to say to the public and to the listeners that most of the big policy changes that came in Indian country, they came out of the Northwest. They came out of affiliated tribes, and they came out of Colville, and they come out of Lummi and Muckleshoot. A lot of those small tribes had a huge impact on policy today. So wanted to say I'm glad you're still around, Mel. I haven't seen anybody from the Northwest for quite a few years. I've been home since 94, I think, and back to Pine Ridge. But still kicking, and I hope you're doing well.
Mel, sounds like you and George go back a few years.
Yeah, he's from Pine Ridge, and that is important to me because when I got president of, even before that, when I was running for tribal council, Lucy Covington put together quite a campaign, and we started a little paper called Our Heritage. And she knew a guy by the name of Chuck Trimble, who I think started the Indian Press organization. And he was from Oglala, Pine Ridge country. And it was funny because at one time Lucy asked Chuck, what do you think of my slate of candidates? And he said, they're all pretty good except that Tonasket. He seems kind of young. I was 30 at the time. And 3 years later, I was president of NCAI, and he was my executive director. And so I got to work with Chuck for 6 years. So Pine Ridge, every time I hear that name of that tribe, I think of my buddy Chuck Trimble. Mm-hmm. He was a great guy.
It's interesting that George noted that so many big policy developments actually had their beginnings there in the Pacific Northwest. And Mel, going back to this whole issue with termination, you folks voted that down, but then what was the process like afterwards? I mean, here you had to now basically build and maintain a viable tribal presence. What was that whole process like, and what were the challenges?
It was really difficult because we didn't have money, and we were just, some of the council had carried a chainsaw on the mountains. I just worked in IIM. We didn't have attorneys. We had 14 councilmen and about 6 employees. We only had about $3 million of total tribal annual income from timber sales. And so we didn't have anything. And so we really had to find from our people what is your primary thing that you want us to work on. It's one thing to beat something. It's another thing to replace it, was what our thinking. So we started having community meetings. What's your priorities? And employment was one, housing was another, and then, of course, it added more and more. But those were the start of where we were going to go. The terminating council turned away a lot of federal money, federal program dollars for economic development and housing and so on. So our job was then to get back to Washington, D.C. and knock on doors and say, the Colville tribe has changed its mind. We changed our direction, and we're here to work with you. We need your help. And Lucy knew so many people back in D.C. from her anti-termination campaigning that it was pretty easy to get in the doors. So I got to watch her work the Senate and the House. I got to watch her work Interior. I got to watch her work HUD. And I learned a lot there. But it took a lot of work. And luckily enough, and I say this wherever I meet, like at Affiliated or NCI, I was just lucky to be at the right time with the right people around, because we had really great leaders from the different tribes. We had great leaders in the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, and we developed a strong team. And when we pulled all of our ideas together, our voices together, whatever resources we had, we wound up really strong. And so, if it would have been another time without those right people around, I don't know if we'd have got to where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, when we got recognized to fight termination, and that was what we really focused on too, was to get Congress to rescind the policy of termination. So what do you replace it with? Self-determination. And that's where that idea came from. And leadership around the Indian country was all in favor of, self-determination. We can take care of ourselves without termination. And that's how the Public Law 638 idea came about. So some of us leaders had the idea of what we needed, but we just needed to find the smart people that could put the words together on paper, and so that we could go lobby and work the Hill for those things. And that's been kind of my career, is we have an idea of what needs to be done, and then you got to find the people that can help build that for you, help develop that for you, so that you will have the information to go debate the Hill. And I'll use the Indian Child Welfare Act. When I was first elected to the Tribal Council, we was looking at our needs. This was after what was called Public Law 280, where the federal government authorized states to assume certain jurisdictions. My termination council agreed to give up child welfare to the state of Washington. And during that time that state had jurisdiction, we had lost over 300 of our babies that were taken and adopted out by the state of Washington to where we don't know. And even a few years ago, we were still having people finding their way back to the tribe. And that was in the late 60s that was going on. And so when you talk to other tribes, they were going through the same thing. So when we come up with an idea, we needed to change the law. We can't just complain about it. We got to change the law. How do we do that? And what would be the language that would go into a piece of law that we could sell? And then the other part was, how do we get Congress to have faith that we can develop tribal court systems and the professionals to assume those jurisdictions if we got the law passed? That was really a difficult process.
Such a pivotal time in contemporary Native American history, Mel. Just really, really amazes me what you folks were up against, and so many tribes just have such a supreme debt of gratitude here with regard to the sacrifices and just the advocacy that you folks were involved in. Mel, we've got a couple of callers lined up again, so I want to go ahead and take the first person here. This is Roseanne, who is listening in Fort Hall, Idaho on radio station KISU. Hello, Roseanne. What's your comment?
Hello, Mel Tonasket. I was your Miss NCAI when you made the leadership. And I was also chaperoned by Lucy Covington at the time. It was just a tremendous time, and I was able to sit up in front with all of you and listen to people coming in with great political issues. And the irony of this whole thing is that I ended up marrying a man from your reservation, and he happened to be the nephew of Lucy, Daryl Abrahamson. And so it was just a special memory for me. It was a powerful memory. The years that you served and the years that I was in that position was a very powerful time in my life and in my experience. But today I see a difference. What do you think about the current status of NCI today And what do you think we need to do to enhance political power as Native American people? That's my first question. And my second question is, I understand that the premise of our sovereignty is based on three concepts: that Native Americans have a unique language, a unique culture, and unique ceremonies. Is that still in place? And I'd also like to say it is so good to hear your voice again.
Thank you very much. You know, who'd have thought that after 52 years, I'd still be at the table preaching. But thank you for those kind words. I remember when I first got president, and I had spent most of my time in the resolutions committee, so I never really got to see the floor work until affiliated tribes delegation came down to the resolutions room and said, we caucused and we're going to run you for president. That's when my life really changed. So, but I agree that those were special times because we were opening doors at the time. And your question of now, what about NCAA now? We just got done with the convention over in Seattle, and what I was out for a while of politics, and then one of my councilmen passed away 3 years ago, and I was asked to come back and finish that term, and here I still am at 80. Well, I'll be 86 in less than a month, which is strange. But what I see is different now, and I preach it, whether it's at affiliated or at NCAI, is how to think. We have a lot of council around the country, and they're young. A lot of them are young. A lot of them are really smart, educated, and I can't say nothing bad about them. And their thoughts are they look at things differently. Like when Trump first came in, and we were afraid of budget cuts because of what was being said about education and health and that sort of thing. And so where are we in the Indian world, even with treaties and special rights and privileges that were guaranteed? Where are we in all of this planning? And so the new leadership was focusing their reactions to consider around money, around budgets. And my concern was, and they also referred to, we got to tell them it's the federal government's trust responsibility to provide our health, to provide our education, to provide. And I took the position that who in the administration really knows what that trust responsibility is? Where does it come from? Have they even looked at the treaties? Have they even studied the Constitution that develops that relationship, that special relationship with tribal governments in the treaties that can only treaty with another sovereign? No, they don't. So we gotta think of new ways to sell our message, not just rely on it's your trust responsibility. So develop a different process and a different language that you can go and talk when you go talk to any of the departments, whether it be education, whether it be health, or whether it be housing. And so we're all saying it from the same message.
Okay.
From the same. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We have to change.
All right. Yeah. No, you're making a lot of sense, Mel. And the second part of Roseanne's question was regarding the basis of sovereignty, and is it based on language, culture, and ceremony? What's your thought there?
We believe it is, but I think when you look at the legal and historical background recognizing sovereignty, is because of the Constitution says that the United States can only treaty with another sovereign. can't treaty with a business or corporation, only with another sovereign. And so when they started developing the first treaties with tribes, that proved sovereignty. Whether it was they talked about language or anything else, I don't know. But I do know the very simple words in the Constitution sets us out as sovereigns. What we do with that is up to us. How we sell it is up to us. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that really resonates with our listeners as well. We're going to take another break, Mel. We're going to come back. I think we might have at least one more caller. And of course, we got a lot more to talk about. I want to ask you about what it was like growing up in Omak and what you've seen in terms of changes there over the years. And I'd also like to learn a little bit more about the history of the Colville tribe. So we'll talk about that on the other side of this break. And we do have the phone line still open for more listeners who would like to join the conversation. Sounds like Mel Tonasket has known a lot of people throughout Indian country, worked with a lot of folks, and earned a lot of respect. And we've got people calling in and giving him props. So you could be next, 1-800-996-2848. The number's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. And check us out on social media. Go to our Facebook page, Instagram. We also have Blue Sky and Threads. And post, comment, and like any thoughts with regard to today's show and Mel Tonasket. We'll be right back.
The Indian Arts and Crafts Board promotes Indian artists of federally recognized tribes through its online source directory. Information on this no-charge opportunity available at doi.gov/IACB, who support this program.
Need help identifying community priorities? Kaufman & Associates' approach to evaluation is rooted in Indigenous knowledge, honoring tribal history, and sovereignty. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
You are listening to Native America Calling. Let's continue our conversation with Mel Tonasket from the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. And if you would like to join us, you can by calling 1-800-996-2848. Share a question or a comment. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We have another caller on the line. This is Yvette, who is listening to our show online in Colville, Washington. You're on the air, Yvette.
Congratulations, Mel. It's nice to hear that you're the Native American in the spotlight. I remember meeting you for the first time at the BIA office when it was located up by the top of Grand Coulee Dam, and you were showing me how to operate a copy machine. And I was 12 at the time, so that was probably back in 1970 or 71. But anyway, I'm happy that you're being recognized. That's great. I'm glad, too, that you have honored Lucy and Chuck Trimble. I actually got to interview Chuck in Omaha in his home, talking about the great work that Lucy had accomplished with the help of you and individuals like my dad.
Yeah.
It was a great interview. What I really wanted to point out was the Our Heritage newsletter. You know, I spent about a year trying to locate as many copies of that as possible. And they are actually, many of those are in a box in the archive center of the Colville tribe. But I think it would be great if we could get those out and have them mass produced and put on display for like our tribal celebrations and for ATI meetings, or even for distribution, you know, somehow through a mechanism to promote the cartoons that Chuck created, the writings of Vine Deloria, the insights of our famous Poop Lagoon, Gene Joseph, and others like him who would write about what would happen if we lost our rights as Native people. That's all I want to say.
Well, I'm glad you're on. I'm glad you brought up Poop Lagoon. He was my buddy. But I didn't know that our archives had copies of our heritage. So I agree with you. If we got those, I'm going to try to see if we can get those utilized better because those are historical. Those really
Yeah,
help change the minds of people on whether to terminate or not. And Chuck was uh, really instrumental in what words to use and how to use them in those little papers. So
right.
yeah, thanks for reminding me about or letting me know where they're at because I only have like maybe one of all of them that was made out at the time. So
I
thank
know
you for that.
it's hard to find them. There was one at the University of Arkansas because apparently they have an archive of Native newsletters, and the person who sort of turned me on to that was Mark Trahant, and
Okay.
Mark, did a lot to sort of
Yeah.
celebrate Chuck, and but it's
Yeah.
just I'm trying to actually write a biography about Lucy for grade schoolers because really in across the country in the United States, there's only biographies about Wilma Mankiller or
Yeah.
the Miss Tall Chief, Maria Tall Chief,
Yeah.
and there are Barbie dolls like them, but there's not very many books about Native American women or the women in our leadership. So
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for
Mm.
calling in, and geez, you folks have a lot of shared history there. Um, Mel, we have another caller on the line, but before we take this next caller, I want to ask you a little bit about your childhood and what it was like growing up in Omak.
It was it was tough. It was tough. My first memories were more of living out in the mountains in lumber camps when I was little. I mean, really little, and living in kind of like army tents. Uh, and I had to move into town when I turned 7 to start school. And when my mom was real fair, she was an enrolled flathead. My old man was full blood. He was dark, and he was the one working in the woods at the time. And so when we came into Omak to find a place to live, to rent, here on the reservations side of Omak, we found a place. And Mom says told the guy we got to wait until my husband comes home this evening, and we'll meet you here. And they said okay. And so when we got to the door, it was dark, and I went in first. The guy was smiling. My mom came in next. He was smiling, and then my old man came in, and his smile went away. And he immediately said, "I'm sorry, I've already rented the place." That was my first real memory of moving to Omak. And so it was during a racist time that I hated. I mean, you had to travel like in groups from my side of town to Overtown, over across the river to the non-Indian side. Otherwise, you're getting in fights. Uh, so we were pretty segregated. And when I was little, I swore when I grow up and I can decide where I'm going to live, it'll never be here. And then when I got mad enough uh, to fight the politics, this is where I moved. And I moved here in '68, and I'm still here. And when I first moved back and got on the tribal council, people still wouldn't talk to me because I was talking about water rights. I was talking about jurisdictions. I was still kind of feuding with the schools about Johnson O'Malley funds and federal impact aid monies, how they're being spent or not spent right. And so a lot of the townspeople wouldn't even talk to me. Today, they found that I'm not the racist. I'm not saying get on your own side of the river. I'm. They see me as somebody who has lived through the poor of the tribe to where now the tribe is the biggest employer in Okanagan County. They recognize that now. And I'm not saying that I did it. I'm just saying I was a part of a system uh, that helped develop the tribe. So we are the biggest employer in Okanagan County. And so times have changed. There's still little snips of that anti-Indian stuff, just like there would be of any other race. But it's not the big thing anymore. I've been asked to sit on the Home Health and Hospice Board of Directors. I've been asked to sit on interview committees of hospital administrator applicants. I've been asked if I would consider running the county mental health program, and I'm not a mental health worker. I don't even have a college degree, so how could I do that? But I'm saying those things as an example of how it's changed. Instead of people not wanting to talk to me, now asking me to be involved in decision-making kinds of things around the town and the county. So that's quite a change for me. Yeah.
That is. Yeah, for sure. That must be exciting, though. It must make you feel good to have these folks treat you as well as they do and have as much respect for your knowledge and your expertise. Mel, this is another caller on the line, Joseph, who is listening in Hoopa, California on station KIDE. Good morning, Joseph. It's great to have you calling in.
Good morning, Sean. Thank you for taking my call. I had a question for Mel. I was wondering if you were around when Jeff Goebel was working with, I think, the forestry department, and he was working with a group of young people, and he was also interested in holistic financial management. And then later, after he left and they had witnessed what the students had learned and had shown them that is possible, they invited him back to help the tribe create a holistic quality of life statement for the Colville tribe. I was wondering if you knew anything about that, if there was still hanging on your wall, or anything about that.
Gee, really, I don't remember that. I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember that. I don't know what years that was. I was out of politics and for about 12 years. And so things happened. And when I got out of it, I stayed out of it. I didn't want to be one of those ex-tribal leaders that thought they knew everything and was trying to advise. So I just pretty much stayed in my house or in the mountains. And so I missed out on a lot of the different things through those years that I tried to retire. So no, I'm sorry I don't remember his name or that.
Mel, what led you to leave politics and then come back in? What was that process all about?
Well, I was burned out. I think, physically, emotionally, psychologically burned out. There was a time during my NCAI and even shortly after that where and I was dumb. I agreed to be appointed to different boards and commissions, and so I was always gone. And I didn't get to see my three sons grow up very much. And my body clock was messed up from traveling back and forth to DC all the time without taking the time in between to get readjusted. And so in 89, I didn't know when to sleep. I didn't know when to eat. I didn't know when to go to the toilet. I was not in a good way. And so I told my wife, I got to get out. When I kept a log of the time that I got to be in my house, in my yard for almost a year, it was like little over 3 days a month. That's how much I was on the road, whether going to DC or Denver or San Diego or Olympia, or I was just gone. And I needed to get away from my own health. And so I stayed away. And then later on, somebody was getting removed from the tribal council, and they asked if I would agree to take their place, finish their term. And the first time it was, no, I had tickets to Merle Haggart's show over on the coast, and I'm going to go see Merle Haggart. So my oldest son, got appointed to finish that term. And one of his first actions that he had to make and were required to vote on, and you couldn't abstain, was the removal of a different councilman. And so I got a call then, do you have any more concerts that you got to go to? And I said, no. They said, well, this happened. Would you consider running for that position? And that's what brought me back. We were debating water adjudication, and I'm really anti-state jurisdiction over water. And we were taking some actions or the council had taken some actions that I disagreed with. And when they would talk about it, they would go into closed. And so I thought, well, if I'm on the council, they can't kick me out now. And so here I am. And an example, I just got invited by Senator, I want to say Trudeau from Washington State Legislature to meet next week on water issues for the state of Washington. So, went from being burned out to now I'm being invited to go participate in things that's not only going to affect my people, but the whole state of Washington. Mm-hmm. And so it's even though I'm old, I did have my break. I had my rest, and
now you're back.
I'm good for another 9 months. My term is up in 9 months, and then
9 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Geez, Mel, we're just about out of time, but I do want to ask you a little bit about what your thoughts are towards the future and what advice you're imparting to the next generation of tribal leaders.
That's a good question. And I think about that when we go into regional and national meetings. I advise the tribal, wherever I go, that as long as we have reservations, as long as there's treaties that set out special rights and privileges, as long as we own natural resources, whether it be water, coal, uranium, timber, land, there'll always be people that want it from us, whether it be companies or individuals. So I don't think we'll ever have another termination bill, but I think that we got to watch, and this is what I tell the young people, you got to watch for piecemeal termination. Little bills that don't say anything about Indians in the bills, whether they be federal or state, that can later be interpreted that it might affect Indians and Indian rights and treaty rights and land issues and water. So really be aware of every bill in both the federal and the state, every bill, to see if it could be interpreted to affect us, and be ready to make changes and to fight for those changes. The other thing that I say is that when I went in the Navy, they sent me to a spy school. And in that school, one of the first things they teach you is that the United States government is one of the best at manipulating and maneuvering foreign countries.
Okay.
And so if you're on a tribal council, you're a foreign country. So when you're finding problems in-house, anti one another, you're fighting yourselves, why? Where does that come from? Are we being manipulated?
Okay,
so be
Mel,
aware, be careful.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mel Tonasket. We'll be back tomorrow for a look at one of Australia's state's historic treaty with Aboriginal people. I'm Sean Spruce. Thanks for listening.
The Association on American Indian Affairs invites all to Tribal Museums Day, December 6th through December 12th. Tribal museums may offer no-cost or reduced admission, art markets, and live cultural demonstrations. Tribal Museums Day honors diverse Native nations as the experts of their own cultures. You can find a map of tribal museums and more at indian-affairs.org/Tribal Museums Day. The association supports this show. Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 877-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiverresources. AARP supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.